All right. Turns out that getting all this information out there makes for a really long video, but I hope you're enjoying it. And in this video, we're going to be talking about planes. I've got a couple of North American style iron body planes as well as a lot of Japanese planes. And that's really the only experience I have with planes. So if you're talking about European style and all these other planes, like I'm really not a plane expert. I'm just going to share with you what I know, okay? Starting with Japanese planes. Japanese planes just are near and dear to my heart. First of all, because they just look like art. They are art and they're functional. And when you see the shavings that they make, it's also art. It's just a very artful, wonderful experience using a Japanese hand plane that is properly tuned. But I will say this, if you were looking into getting into Japanese tools, you were looking into getting yourself into a lot of work, because maintaining these and setting them up properly and sharpening them is a good time commitment. It's kind of like a spiritual meditation process for me, so I don't really see it as work. I just enjoy looking after my tools. But if you think you're going to buy a Japanese hand plane and it's just going to be ready to go out of the box, you are wrong. Japanese hand planes are usually partially ready to go out of the box. Typically, the guy that makes the blade does not make the block. There's also craftsmen that make just the die blocks. And what they do is they partially fit the blade into within about 2 centimeters of the throat opening, and then they send it to you, the end consumer, in that box. And it is your responsibility to fit the blade the rest of the way properly into the die so that it works. This takes a little bit of skill. Usually you take the blade out and you scribble on the back with a pencil and you kind of just wedge it in spots, and you find all the little high spots where the pencil marks rub off on the wood, and you just slowly shave it down, just a little bit at a time, keep fitting the blade, keep fitting the blade in until it finds its way down. Now, the way that I was taught from a Japanese craftsman to know that the right tension of the blade is you want to get it within about half a centimeter of the throat opening, maybe 3/16 of an inch, and then what it should be is, so when the blade is loose, to loosen the blade, you hit the back of the block and the blade will loosen itself out, because the Japanese blades are tapered in a couple different directions. So as you wear the blade down, it actually gets tighter and tighter in the die, and that's how they last for such a long time, then blades don't get loose. So you put it in there by hand like that, and I can see that I'm within about 1/8 of an inch. Sometimes you probably want to be about 3/16 or 4, 5 millimeters, and then what it should be is a couple good taps with the hammer, and then your blade should just be at the throat opening. So worst case scenario, if you do adjust your block too much, as you can see I've done here, you can just put a couple layers of tape or glue some newspaper in there, and that will tighten the opening so that your blade isn't too loose in the die body. The other unique thing about Japanese planes, other than the fact that they're just a block of wood and a blade, is the way that they condition the bottom of the plane block. Now you would think that, oh, well, it's just flat, right? You just make sure it's flat. Well, no, it's not just flat. It's actually relieved in a few different areas. So the only actual parts of the bottom of the die, or the plane block, that are in contact with the wood are maybe 1 centimeter or half an inch in front of the plane blade, and then about 1 centimeter or half an inch in the front, at the very front of the plane block. And then all this space in between is actually relieved about the thickness of a couple newspapers, so maybe like a 32nd of an inch. You can use either a scraper, or they make a special Japanese scraper plane that is used to relieve that wood so that this part of the plane is not in contact with the wood, as well as behind the blade. They relieve that whole section as well. So what this does is it just gives you a very keen sense of your cutting edge, because you're not getting any friction from the other parts of the plane body. And it allows you to just take stupid thin, beautiful shavings. They actually have a competition in Japan through the Kazurokai Carpenters Guild every year, where all the great carpenters get together and they compete to take the thinnest shaving off a piece of wood. And we're talking like in the microns, like 2 microns thin, like just ridiculously accurate and wonderful these planes are. So that being said, this plane is actually my most high quality and just prized possession. I got this on eBay. I snagged it for a sweet deal, and I just love it to death. You can see all the beautiful hand tapped Japanese kanji, all tapped in by master craftsmen. For you guys that don't know anything about Japanese plane blade, they are forged in the same way as like chisels, where they laminate a thin layer of quality cutting steel onto a softer iron body. You could see the lamination line along the side as well as along the blade bevel. It's only about maybe 1/16 of an inch or 2 or 3 millimeters thick. And then the rest of the plane body is made out of a softer iron, either from like old ship boilers and anchor chains or anchors from ships. So there's a lot of skill and work that goes into making this plane blade. It's not just some manufactured machine stamped blade. As well as the blocks are all hand cut with chisels out of one piece of wood. So you're not gonna find a quality Japanese hand plane for like less than $200 to $300. They are out there, but a lot of them are in really rough shape, and I don't recommend buying like really old used Japanese hand planes on eBay, because likely the block is toast and you either have to make a whole new block, or even the blade is really requires a ton of repair. So I've bought a few old ones and I just vowed never to do it again. It's just better to buy a new Japanese hand plane, because they're already enough work just setting them up when they're new. When they're super old and not well maintained, well, you might as well just take on a second job. So in the Japanese culture, primarily they build out of softwood called hinoki, which is kind of equivalent to our cedar here. So Japanese hand planes really work best on softwoods. That's not to say that they don't work on hardwoods, they do, but especially the white steel, it takes a super keen edge, which just cuts softwood absolutely beautifully. But they do make planes with harder, more alloy steels that are tougher and work good on hardwoods as well. I've got one here which is made with what's called a swallow steel, so it's got a little bit more tungsten in it. It's a really hard wearing steel. Can't get quite as sharp of an edge as the white steel can, but it's really tough and works great on hardwoods. But when it comes down to taking like super thin shavings and just leaving like a gorgeous polish on the wood, it's typically really hard to do that on hardwoods. So I find that the iron body North American style planes tend to be a little bit more versatile in the hardwood area of things. But at the same time, I'll always go to my Japanese plane first, just because I love the fact that Japanese planes work on the pole stroke, giving you just so much more control when you're using the plane, as well as they're just so simple to set up. It's just a few taps with a hammer and you're ready to go. Whereas North American planes require a little bit more dialing in, and especially these newer Veritas planes have all sorts of set screws and little nicker blades and adjustment things, which allows you to do all sorts of versatile, fine-tuned applications. I just find that it's not quite so much of a spiritual experience when I'm using my North American style planes. It's just my personal preference. I still love this plane. Speaking of this plane, let me tell you all about it. This is the low angle rabbiting jack plane, also called the Jackrabbit by Veritas. It is kind of the best of everything, because you have a plane blade that goes right to the edge of your body, so you can do any kind of rabbiting work. You can plane across the grain because the blade is set at a low angle bevel up plane setup, which means you could put a lower degree bevel on your blade, like 30 degrees, which will allow you to pair end grain with this thing beautifully. And then if you want to do harder grain woods, like surface planing, you can just get a second blade and put a steeper bevel on it, and then it'll work just like your 45-degree jack plane. This blade also has these beautiful little round nicker blades that work on a cam, so you can twist them either out of the way so that they're not in the way, or you can drop them down to different depth, thickness, so that they actually cut when you're pairing across the grain. It'll actually cut the wood grain so there's no tear out on the edge of your cuts. It's just, they've thought of everything with this plane. They've also got these little set screws that hold the blade perfectly parallel so that it can't skew inside the plane body, and the adjustment is, you just loosen this tiny little bit and you got your in and out depth adjustment that's really sensitive, as well as the adjustable throat opening that moves back and forth. So when it comes to a North American iron body plane, this has got you covered. It's just phenomenal. Obviously, it's not going to be the ideal plane for surface planing, because you need to put the little bit of a swoop on the end of your blade when you're doing a lot of surface planing, so that you don't leave those little sharp edges from the edge of the blade. But as far as like doing your just basic joining or any kind of joinery, or getting into rabbets and rebates on tenons and tenon cheeks and shoulder cuts, this plane can do pretty much anything. It also comes with this fence that simply screws into these threaded holes on either side of the plane. And then you can actually even screw different thicknesses, pieces of wood. If you want a deeper fence, you can put different bevel angled pieces of wood and screw it to this fence so that you can actually plane angles. So the versatility of this tool is just off the charts, in my opinion. And the cherry on top is that this little Allen key loosens the screw right here, and you can even skew the handle to either side so that when you're planing like a large tenon on a timber, you don't want to smash your knuckles on the cheek of that tenon. So you can just skew the handle out of the way so that you can plane like right tight into corners without ripping your knuckles open on a piece of wood. So yeah, there's really not much more I could say. I will say that this is very expensive because you are paying for that versatility, and it's like a $380 or $90 plane Canadian. So it is a considerable investment, but this is also just a lifetime tool. And the time it saves and the joy that it brings to all your woodworking projects, well, it's worth the $400 in my opinion. The other beauty iron body plane I have is basically the little baby brother to that rabbiting plane, and it's the low angle Nielsen bevel up rabbiting block plane. And I actually have a special pouch on my vest just for this plane because it's so versatile and light and easy to carry around. So if you're not able to spend the $400, which I completely understand, I would highly recommend spending, I think it's like $175 for this little bad boy because it's just as well made and basically does the same thing minus a few of the fancy features of that plane. So feel free to check that out. I'll leave a link in the description box below. So sometimes these are hard to find online, but if you just search the Nielsen low angle rabbiting block plane, you'll find some suppliers that sell it online. You will not be disappointed in this purchase. All right, I'm gonna bounce back to Japanese hand planes. There's so many planes out there, and honestly, I don't even own half of them, but I got this little beauty. It's a curved bottom plane, which allows you to do the inside of curves, which is actually really handy. I've used that on several projects. As well as they make these beautiful rabbet planes. I actually made the body for this one. The body that I got was twisted, so I just popped the blade out, made a new one out of wingay, and I love this tool. I'm gonna leave a link in the description box below for a video about Sashimono Woodwork, which is in Japan. Sashimono Woodwork is like really fine, delicate, smaller scale woodwork like chests and drawers and furniture and that sort of stuff. And they use all of these like beautiful little planes. This is actually a Chinese plane, but they have all these planes for all these different applications, and it's absolutely like mind-blowing, the quality of the craftsmanship and the small scale. Like when you're dealing with tiny little dovetails and miter joints on small scale work, everybody knows like how absolutely demanding and hard it is to do that kind of work. I don't even think my skills are there. But check out that video in the link below where it shows these craftsmen building these pieces of furniture and these chests that fit together like you would not believe. So there is just a ton of information and just beautiful stuff that you can find on eBay. It goes into further depth on Japanese tools especially, but I've kind of shared with you everything that I know. Once again, with planes, it's not so much the tool as it is the edge that you put on the tool and how you use it. So yes, spending the money on some high quality planes is going to benefit you as a woodworker, but not if you don't know how to sharpen them properly. So the same amount of time and energy that you're going to invest into purchasing these planes and looking after them, you have to invest that into keeping those blades sharp and sharpened properly. And I will link up in the corner in the description box below a few of my sharpening videos if you want to learn more about sharpening with, Japanese water stones and that sort of stuff as well. There are really so many better videos on YouTube about the North American iron body planes. So feel free to search other YouTubers because I'm really not an expert at all in the North American iron body planes. I just really love the ones that I have. Really, the majority of my knowledge is focusing on Japanese tools. So if you have any questions about Japanese planes, where to get them, I'll leave a few links to some online tool stores, but I will tell you that Japanese hand planes, especially when you're buying high quality ones new, they are stupid expensive, and that's why I only have a couple, because they run anywhere from like $400 to $1,000 a piece. So it's like, so you have to be really committed and into woodworking to be able to even afford or justify the expense of these art tools. But it's good to go and check out those websites anyways, just to kind of drool over how beautiful these tools are and the craftsmanship that goes into making them. I'll leave a link to the Veritas Jackrabbit plane below if you want to check that out on Lee Valley Tools. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about Japanese handsaws, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you like this video, share it with all your tool nerd friends. If you're not subscribed, get your head checked, and I'll see you in the next video. Samurai out.